Story number 1.
It was in the fall of 2011 when I started my junior year at Wexley High School. Our school was old, built in the 1940s, and though parts of it had been renovated over the decades, the gymnasium still retained most of its original structure. The bleachers were made of creaky, painted wood, and the locker rooms had thick, chipped tiles on the floor and peeling green paint on the walls. It smelled of mildew, stale sweat, and something else I could never quite identify, like wet stone or a flooded basement. I never thought much about it until the first few weeks into the school year. I had gym class every third period, right before lunch. Our coach, Mr. Talbot, was one of those no-nonsense types. Mid-50s, military haircut, tight black whistle string always around his neck. He barked orders, hated whining, and never smiled unless someone fell while running sprints. He wasn't exactly the warm, encouraging type, but he knew how to push us. That semester, we were doing basketball drills, and the gym echoed constantly with the thump of balls and squeaks of sneakers. It was during one of these drills that something strange happened. We were running suicides, back and forth across the court, when Brandon, a senior who was probably the best athlete in our class, suddenly stopped mid-stride and doubled over. He clutched his head like something had stabbed into his skull, screaming. I'd never heard a sound like that before. It was raw and animalistic. Coach rushed over, yelling at us to back up. Brandon was shaking, convulsing slightly, and then just stopped. His eyes rolled back into his head for a few seconds before he came to. When the nurse came down, Brandon could barely speak. He kept mumbling, "It's in the walls," over and over. He was gone the next day. Not just out sick, gone. His name was taken off the attendance list. When I asked about him, Coach snapped, "Focus on your own health, not someone else's problems." But I knew Brandon. We weren't close friends, but he wasn't the type to just vanish. Word went around he transferred schools after a mental breakdown. Some said his parents pulled him out because he'd been seeing things. Others claimed he tried to hurt himself. No one could agree on what was real. After that, gym class just felt off. Everyone was quieter, less goofing off, fewer jokes. Even the way sound moved in that place felt wrong. There were moments during laps when I'd swear someone was behind me, their footsteps syncing perfectly with mine, but every time I turned, there was no one there. The locker room started to get worse too. I'd never liked the place to begin with. Those heavy rusted lockers, the broken tile near the far showers, the flickering overhead lights that buzzed just enough to make your skin crawl. One afternoon, after class had ended and I was changing, I realized I was alone. Everyone else had already cleared out and I was taking my time. I bent down to tie my shoe when I felt this intense cold on the back of my neck. Not like a draft, but like someone was standing right behind me, breathing. I turned so fast I nearly lost balance, but there was no one there. Then, from the showers, I heard a footstep. Just one. A slow, wet, deliberate step on tile. I stared down the hallway that led to the shower stalls, heart hammering. I called out, "Hello," but there was no answer. Another step. Closer this time. I backed toward the exit, grabbing my bag without taking my eyes off the hallway. The air was thick and wet, and something smelled metallic like old blood. I left in a panic and refused to change in there for weeks after that. I'd sneak out to the nurse's bathroom to change, risking detention. I didn't care. A couple weeks later, it got worse. My friend Jace had gym class with me. We'd known each other since middle school. He wasn't the type to scare easy, always playing the tough guy. One day, we were stuck doing partner drills together, medicine ball passes, wall sits, that kind of thing. It was near the end of class. Most people were bored and drained. Coach had gone to take a call, and everyone slacked off. Jace nudged me and said he was going to grab water. He jogged toward the locker room, but after 10 minutes, he still hadn't come back. I figured maybe he was hiding out, dodging drills. I asked Coach if I could check on him, and after some grumbling, he agreed. I walked into the locker room and immediately felt it. Thick air, silence so deep it felt like cotton in my ears. I called for Jace. No answer. I checked the benches, the rows between lockers, even peeked into the stalls. The showers were off. No steam, no sound. Then I saw a smear on the tile. Brown red. It looked like something had been dragged. My stomach dropped. I followed it. It led toward the last shower stall, the one that never worked, the one everyone avoided. Its door was slightly ajar. I hesitated before pulling it open. Inside it was empty, but the smear stopped there. That's when I heard the whisper, clear as anything. Help me. It wasn't loud. In fact, it was soft enough to question if I'd heard it at all. But it was close. Too close. Like someone was standing in the stall with me, behind the mold-darkened curtain. I ran. I bolted back to the gym and told Coach Jace wasn't there. He grumbled something about stupid kids playing games and went to check himself. Jace came back the next day. He said he didn't remember anything after going to get water. He said the last thing he recalled was stepping into the locker room and then waking up at home with a splitting headache. His mom thought he was on drugs. He dropped the class a week later. Over the next few months, things escalated. Weird sounds in the walls, scratching, tapping, like fingers on plaster. The lights in the locker room would flicker every day at the same time, usually just before fourth period ended. I once saw water dripping down from a vent, even though the school hadn't had rain in days. It smelled like sewage. And then there was Miss Carter. She was a new substitute teacher, filling in for a few weeks when Coach Talbot took emergency leave. No one knew why he left, and no one asked. She was young, probably fresh out of college, and way too enthusiastic for her own good. The first time she stepped into that gym, the temperature dropped. I remember it vividly because she paused and looked up like she heard something. She laughed it off, saying the place gave her old ghost movie vibes. That week, someone spray painted "Don't look in the mirrors" across the mirror in the locker room. The school tried to clean it, but the letters kept bleeding through the new coats of paint. Eventually, they just replaced the mirror altogether. One afternoon, Miss Carter disappeared. We had gym. Everything was normal. She said she was heading into the equipment closet to grab more jump ropes. We heard her open the door, the sound of metal clanking. Then nothing. Minutes passed. Then more. After 10 minutes, someone knocked on the door. No response. A janitor was called. They unlocked it. Empty. No Miss Carter. No sign of her. No one ever saw her again. Police got involved. Cameras checked. But somehow, the camera that covered the hallway outside the equipment closet went out for 23 minutes, right during the time she went in. That was the final straw for my mom. When she heard about it, she demanded I be transferred out of gym class. She didn't even give me a choice. I was moved to study hall. I should have been relieved, but I couldn't shake it. The feeling that something had been watching all of us in that gym. The feeling that whatever had taken Brandon, messed with Jace, and erased Miss Carter wasn't done. 2 months later, Coach Talbot returned. Thinner, paler, like he hadn't slept in weeks. He barely spoke, just whistled commands, never made eye contact. A friend from my study hall group said the gym lights kept shorting out, that kids complained about hearing someone crying behind the lockers. The school eventually locked off the old locker rooms entirely and moved classes to the secondary gym in the newer wing. No one was told why. A janitor named Marcus, who'd worked there for decades, told me in confidence one day that someone had died in that gym a long time ago. A kid. Back in the late 40s. Said he drowned during swim class when the school still had a basement pool. But the thing was, his body was never found, just his clothes. Folded neatly by the pool's edge, they sealed the pool up, built the gym floor over it, the tapping in the walls, the cold, the voices. Marcus just shook his head and muttered, he never left. Even now, years later, I sometimes dream about that place. The green-tiled locker room, the showers that dripped when they shouldn't, the whispers I could never explain. And sometimes I wake up sweating, with the taste of mildew in my mouth and the echo of a voice in my head. Help me. Story the end.
Story number 2.
It happened during the fall semester of 2016, when I was a junior at a public high school in upstate New York. Our school was one of those old, early 1900s buildings that had been renovated over the decades, with sections that still looked like they belonged in another era. The gymnasium in particular felt like it hadn't changed in decades. The wood flooring was faded and groaned underfoot. The high windows were foggy and let in barely any light, and the bleachers had that dry, splintered feel like they hadn't been replaced in a lifetime. It always smelled like sweat and dust, and I swear no matter how much they cleaned it, the scent never left. Gym class was sixth period for me, right after lunch. My class was made up of about 20 students. mostly juniors and seniors, a few sophomores. Our gym teacher was Mr. Keen, a thick-necked guy with a permanent sunburn and a whistle that he loved using a little too much. He was the kind of teacher who didn't care much if you didn't try hard as long as you didn't cause problems. That semester, we were rotating sports every couple weeks. Basketball, floor hockey, indoor soccer, the usual. The weird stuff started the week we began doing fitness tests. That Monday, we came into class, and Keen told us we'd be doing circuit training and timed runs for the week. We groaned, naturally, but it wasn't out of the ordinary. After warm-ups, he took us into the back section of the gym, a smaller auxiliary room that most students didn't even know existed. It was separated from the main gym by a set of old wooden double doors that looked like they hadn't been used in years. He unlocked them with a rusted key from a heavy ring and swung them open with a groan that echoed through the whole gym. Inside was a narrow rectangular room with high ceilings and small windows high above that let in strips of pale light. There was an old climbing rope that hung down from a metal hook, some old wrestling mats, and a wall lined with dusty wooden lockers that hadn't been used in forever. Keen said we'd use that room for sit-ups, push-ups, and the rope climb. The pull-up bar was bolted into the far end, and a taped line on the floor marked the starting point for sprints. I don't remember the first couple of days being anything unusual. I wasn't a great athlete, but I did all right. By Wednesday, though, things started feeling off. First, it was little things. People said they felt cold in there, even when we were sweating from exercise. The lights, these long overhead fluorescents, would flicker once in a while, even though they'd just been replaced the previous year. Someone joked that the room was haunted. We laughed it off. Then, Mia Swanson fainted during warm-ups. Mia was a senior, pretty athletic, soccer player. She was in the middle of doing sit-ups when she stopped halfway, her face going pale. She looked around the room, then her eyes rolled back, and she collapsed sideways. Keen rushed over and called for the nurse. She came to a minute later, mumbling that she thought someone was whispering to her. When they asked what she meant, she said she heard it right behind her ear, something like, "I see you." Her voice shook when she said it. Everyone thought it was some weird exhaustion thing. She didn't come back to gym for the rest of the week. Thursday, we were running sprints. Keen had split us into pairs, timing us one at a time. My partner was this quiet kid named Eli. We weren't friends, but we got along fine. It was my turn to run, so I took my mark at the tape line and waited for the whistle. As soon as I launched forward, I felt something weird, like the air got thick. I don't know how to describe it, but it felt like moving through heavy water or like running into a wave of pressure. I shook it off, thinking maybe I was just lightheaded. But then, halfway across the room, I heard my name, not shouted, whispered, right by my ear. Zach. I stopped running and turned around fast, thinking maybe Eli said something, but he was at the start line, staring at me with this confused look. I looked at the others near the wall. No one else had moved. Keen blew his whistle and yelled, "Keep going, Westman." I finished the run, slower than usual, and didn't say anything. I figured maybe I imagined it. After class, Eli pulled me aside and asked me something that made my stomach drop. "Did you hear that?" he said. "What?" I asked. "That voice, when you were running." I played dumb, just shook my head and shrugged. "Nah. You?" He hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Yeah. I didn't sleep well that night." Friday was the last day of fitness testing, and Keen had us doing rope climbs in that back room. The rope had this horrible mildew smell to it, and I hated touching it. Half the kids couldn't get more than a few feet off the ground. A couple joked that it felt slippery or damp, even though it looked dry. My turn came up, and I wasn't excited, but I gave it a go. As I climbed, I noticed something strange. The higher I went, the darker it seemed to get, like the lights overhead weren't reaching the top of the room. About 10 feet up, I heard it again. "Don't look down." It was a voice, soft, like someone whispering just above me. I stopped climbing immediately. My arms locked. I didn't want to look up, but I did. Nothing was there, just the hook where the rope was bolted in, and then the rope jerked. I swear on my life, it moved. I wasn't shifting. I was still. But I felt a tug, like something pulling the rope from above. I lost my grip and fell maybe 6 feet, landed hard on the mat. My back hurt for days. Keen said I must have slipped. I wanted to tell him the rope moved, but I couldn't make the words come out. That weekend, Mia posted something on her Instagram that freaked a bunch of us out. It was a blurry photo of the gym hallway, the doors to the auxiliary room just barely visible in the corner. She wrote, "Never going back in there. Don't care what anyone says. I saw him. He was on the ceiling." She deleted it later that day. Monday, things got worse. Keen didn't show up to class. We had a sub, an older woman who clearly had no interest in actually supervising gym. She told us to stay in the main gym and play basketball or walk laps. No one said anything, but we all noticed the doors to the back room were wide open. No one had gone in yet. Eli came up to me and said we should check it out. I told him he was nuts, but he convinced me eventually. I don't know why I agreed. Part of me wanted to see if I was going crazy. Maybe if we went in and saw it was just a normal room, everything would feel fine again. It was cold in there, colder than the rest of the building. We walked in together, slow. The rope still hung in the center, swaying slightly even though no one had touched it. There was no draft in the room. The windows were shut, but it moved, lazy like a pendulum. The locker doors on the far wall were slightly ajar, even though I remembered them being shut before. Eli said, "Do you hear that?" I held my breath. Faintly, so faint I almost thought I was imagining it, I heard a soft scraping sound, like nails on wood. It came from one of the lockers. Eli walked toward it. I wanted to tell him to stop, but my voice caught in my throat. He opened the locker. There was nothing inside, just darkness. Then he screamed. He jumped back, knocking into me, and I caught a glimpse of something just as the locker door slammed shut on its own. A face. Pale, wet-looking skin. Eyes like polished stone, open mouth, black inside, gone in a flash. The door clanged shut so hard it echoed. We bolted. Back in the main gym, we didn't say anything to anyone, just picked up basketballs and pretended we'd been playing the whole time. That night, Eli called me. "Dude," he said, his voice shaking, "there's something in there." I didn't say anything. I don't think it's just a ghost. I think it's something older. It watches us. I felt it. When I looked in that locker, it was like, I don't know, like it wanted me to come in. The next day, Keen was still out. Word was he had a breakdown and took a leave of absence. No one told us why. The doors to the back room were locked again. The school brought in a new gym teacher, Miss O'Donnell, a young woman who didn't know the layout well. When she asked about the rope climb room, a few of us said it was under renovation. We didn't want her opening it again, but someone did. One of the freshman classes apparently used it the following week. A kid, Jason Klein, fell off the rope and broke his arm, said he heard someone whispering, "Jump," swore he didn't mean to let go. They shut the room down for good after that, padlocked it, covered the windows. 2 months later, the school had an incident during winter break. A janitor was found unconscious inside that room, no sign of forced entry. He'd apparently pried the lock open from the inside. When they found him, he kept muttering, "He's still up there," over and over. He was hospitalized, never came back to work. I graduated the next year. I've been back to the school once since then for a reunion. The room is still sealed. No one uses it. I asked one of the teachers about it, an English teacher I used to have, and she got real quiet. Said something about structural damage, unsafe floorboards, but I could see it in her face. She knew something else. I don't know what that thing was or is, but I know it's still in there, waiting. And I can still hear the whisper sometimes when it's quiet enough. Story the end.
Story number 3.
When I was a freshman at Millfield High, gym class was held in the old annex, what students called the tomb. It was a crumbling gray brick building that used to be the original schoolhouse before the main structure was built in the 1960s. The gym inside was cavernous, dim, and had high foggy windows that let in barely enough light to see clearly. The hardwood floor creaked beneath every step, and the overhead lights buzzed like dying insects. Everyone hated going there, especially in the winter when the heaters barely worked and your breath came out in clouds. I had second period gym early enough that the building still felt half asleep. The first time I stepped into the locker room, I thought the air smelled weird. Not just like sweat and old socks, more like mold and copper. The tiles on the floor were chipped and yellowing, and the showers hadn't worked in years. Most of the lockers were dented or rusted shut, so you had to claim one of the few that still opened. Mine was in the far corner, under one of the flickering lights. It didn't take long to realize something was off about the place. At first, it was small things. I'd set my bag down in the locker and come back after class to find it unzipped, though I knew I'd closed it. My shoes would be in a different spot, or a sleeve would be hanging out like someone had rifled through it. I figured maybe other students were messing around, but it kept happening even when I was the first one in and the last to leave. One day, I stayed late after class to look for my phone, which had slipped out of my pocket during a warm-up run. I checked the bleachers, then headed back into the locker room after most of the other students had left. The door creaked closed behind me, and the lights flickered, as usual. I bent down to check under the benches when I heard something metal click. I turned around. The locker next to mine had popped open. That wasn't unusual. Sometimes the old ones just unlatched on their own. But what caught my attention was the way it swung slowly, like someone had gently pushed it. I walked over and nudged it back shut. Then I grabbed my phone, which I eventually found lodged behind a vent, and went to leave. As I walked past the mirrors near the sinks, I caught a glimpse of something behind me. I stopped, turned around. No one was there. I looked back at the mirror. There was a smudge in the shape of a handprint, small, like a child's. I wiped it away and left fast, not caring whether I was imagining it or not. That night, I dreamed about the locker room. The same flickering lights, the same cold, sour smell. But in the dream, I was alone, standing near my locker. A dripping sound echoed through the room. I followed it toward the showers at the back, though in real life they hadn't worked for years. In the dream, they were running. I walked up to the far stall. The water was scalding hot and steam curled from the cracked tile. I reached out to shut the valve off, and then I saw it. A pale face just beyond the curtain. Eyes wide, lips parted, staring at me from behind the plastic. I woke up gasping. The next morning at school, I didn't say anything. Who would I tell? That I was having creepy dreams about the locker room? Things got stranger. A week later, we were playing dodgeball. Our teacher, Mr. Redman, made us divide into teams, and I ended up on one with Jason Rhodes, a senior who mostly kept to himself. He was big, quiet, and had this permanent scowl, like he was always mad at something. Halfway through the game, he stopped moving, just stood there while everyone else kept playing. I saw him staring up at the corner of the gym, where the ceiling beams met the wall. I followed his gaze and didn't see anything, but the look on his face gave me chills. Pure, undiluted fear. Then he dropped the ball he was holding and walked off the court without a word. He didn't come back the next day. Word spread fast. He'd had some kind of breakdown. People said he'd been found in the locker room muttering nonsense and clawing at his own skin. His parents pulled him out of school. No one saw him after that. Mr. Redmond brushed it off as personal issues. I started keeping my gym stuff with me instead of using the locker. I changed in a bathroom near the art wing. I didn't care if it made me late. Being in that room alone, especially when the noise of the other students died down, made me feel like I was being watched. There was one day, though, when I didn't have a choice. I'd forgotten my sneakers in the locker, and we were doing running drills that morning. Mr. Redmond wouldn't let me sit out unless I had a note, so I ran back in after warm-ups to grab them. The room was mostly empty, just the clank of distant lockers being shut and the occasional creak of pipes overhead. I went to my locker, crouched down, and reached inside. The lights buzzed louder. Then I heard it. A soft whisper. At first I thought it was someone in the hallway, maybe laughing or talking, but it wasn't a full voice. Just the end of a word, like a breath. Me. I froze, looked up. No one was there. Then I heard it again. Me, from behind the row of lockers. I stood slowly, heart pounding, and walked toward the sound. As I turned the corner, I saw something move. A figure, just for a second. Small. White. It slipped behind the shower entrance. I should have left. I should have walked straight out and told Mr. Redman I couldn't find my shoes. But something made me go after it. I think part of me wanted it to be a trick. A prank. Something explainable. The showers were dark. The lights above had blown out years ago, and no one ever bothered fixing them. I stepped inside, blinking as my eyes adjusted. There was water on the floor. Not a puddle. Not from a leak. It was a full trail, wet footprints. Bare feet. Small. Leading toward the last stall. I followed slowly, each step echoing louder than it should have. The air was thick and damp. When I reached the last stall, I pushed the curtain aside. It was empty, but there was something etched into the tile on the wall. Scratched in, not written. 3 words. Let me out. I stepped back. That's when the water started running. All the showers burst on at once. I bolted, slipped once on the tile, caught myself, and didn't stop running until I was outside the annex, breathing in cold, dry air. That night, I didn't sleep at all. The next day, I went to the library and dug through old yearbooks and school records. I told the librarian I was doing a project on the school's history. She barely looked up. It took hours, but I found something. An article from 1982. A boy named Eli Jensen, age 14, went missing during gym class. Last seen heading into the locker room to grab something before warm-ups. They never found him. Police searched the school, the surrounding woods, even the crawl spaces. Nothing. Eventually, he was presumed dead. The article said he'd been bullied by upperclassmen, that he'd sometimes hid in the showers to avoid them. But no one knew what happened that day. There was a picture of him. Short, thin, pale, hair dark and parted to the side. It was him. I printed it out and took it home. That night I had the dream again. But this time I didn't wake up when I reached the showers. I pulled back the curtain and Eli was standing there, soaked, shivering, mouth moving without sound. I woke up sobbing. The next week, the school announced that the old annex was closing for renovations. Mold issues, they said, possibly asbestos. All gym classes would move to the newer facility near the back of the school. I should have felt relieved, but I still see Eli sometimes. Not in dreams, in reflections, mirrors, windows, water, always just a glimpse, always in the corner, watching, waiting. I told my parents. My mom said I was traumatized. My dad said ghosts weren't real. Maybe they're right, but every time I walk by the annex, even now, years later, I swear I hear the pipes groaning. I swear I hear footsteps. I swear I hear a boy crying, asking to be let out. And I know, somewhere behind those walls, behind the tile and the rusted plumbing, Eli is still there, still waiting for someone to see him, still waiting for someone to remember. Story the end.
Story number 4.
I transferred to East Ridge High in the middle of my junior year. My family moved because my mom got a job offer she couldn't turn down, and honestly, I wasn't too upset. My old school wasn't anything special, and I figured a change of scenery might be good for me. East Ridge was a sprawling brick building that looked older than it was, with long hallways that smelled like old paper and pine sol. The gym was tucked at the far end of the school, past the cafeteria, and a weird, windowless hallway that always seemed a little too quiet. My first day of gym class started normally enough. The teacher, Mr. Dunleavy, was a tall, wiry man in his 50s with a permanent frown and a whistle he never actually used. He just barked orders like a drill sergeant and expected you to listen. We were in the middle of a badminton unit, so he pointed to a bin of rackets and told me to find a partner. I got paired up with a girl named Amber, who seemed nice enough but didn't talk much. The gym itself was fine. High ceilings, old wooden floors, walls lined with faded championship banners, but there was something about it that made me uncomfortable from the start. It was too dim, even with the overhead lights on. The shadows clung to the corners like they didn't want to let go. After a couple of weeks, I started noticing things. Not dramatic, horror movie stuff, just strange little moments that felt off. Sometimes I'd catch movement out of the corner of my eye like someone walking behind the bleachers, but when I turned, no one was there. Or I'd hear the echo of a ball bouncing when the gym was silent. One time I stayed after class to talk to Mr. Dunleavy about missing a day the following week, and as we stood near the equipment closet, I heard the distinct sound of sneakers squeaking on the court behind us. I looked back, but the gym was empty. Dunleavy paused for a second, like he heard it too, then just said, "Old building. Gets noisy when the temperature shifts." It wasn't just me. One day, in the locker room, I overheard 2 guys from the basketball team talking. One of them, a guy named Dre, said he stayed late after practice to work on his free throws. He told the other guy that the lights flickered, and then he saw someone, he thought it was a girl, standing at center court, just staring at him. When he called out, she didn't move, and then the lights went out completely. When they came back on a second later, she was gone. I expected them to laugh or say he was messing around, But the other guy just nodded and said, "Yeah, man, she's been here for years." That stuck with me. I didn't know what they meant, and I didn't want to ask. The weirdness escalated after that. The next week, during a rainy Thursday afternoon gym class, we were told to run laps indoors because the fields were soaked. I had headphones in, jogging half-heartedly around the court when I felt the air shift. It got cold. Not like I'm a little chilly, but sharp, sudden cold, like when you open a freezer and stick your face inside. My skin broke out in goosebumps. I pulled my headphones out and slowed to a walk. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. They weren't from someone running. They were slow, measured, bare feet slapping against the wood. I turned around quickly, expecting to see someone messing with me, but there was nobody, just the echo of my own breath. I scanned the court. A few kids were on the other side, sitting against the wall and scrolling through their phones. No one was near me. I tried to laugh it off. Maybe the acoustics were weird. Maybe I was hearing myself. But as I turned back to keep walking, I caught a reflection in the small mirror mounted next to the equipment closet. It wasn't clear, more like a blur, but it was definitely the shape of a girl. She was standing just behind me, shoulder-length hair, no shoes, wearing what looked like an old gym uniform from decades ago. The mirror was dirty and cracked along one corner, so I blinked, leaned in to get a better look, but the image was gone. I didn't tell anyone. I barely believed it myself. A few days later, the fire alarm went off during third period. It was probably a false alarm, but the entire school evacuated as usual. Our class ended up gathering near the back parking lot, which had a clear view of the gym's rear entrance. While we waited, I noticed something odd through the small back window. There was a light on in the gym, and someone was moving inside. Everyone else was outside, teachers included. The figure moved quickly, darting between the bleachers and the basketball hoop, and then stopped. It turned toward the window. Even from that distance, I could see her. A girl, pale, wet hair, wearing an old soaked gym uniform, just staring out. I blinked, and she was gone. After the fire alarm was cleared, I tried to find a reason to go inside again, but the doors were locked. The teachers were herding everyone back to class. I kept quiet, but I couldn't shake the image from my head. The next week, I heard about what happened to Amber. She stopped showing up to school. I didn't think much of it at first. Kids got sick or transferred all the time. But after 3 days, word started going around that she'd been taken to the hospital after collapsing at home. Her mom told someone at the school office that she'd been having episodes, that she claimed someone was following her. When asked who, she said, "The girl from gym class." That's when people really started talking. Mr. Dunleavy didn't come in for 2 days. We had a substitute who barely spoke. Everyone was weirdly quiet in class. I finally asked Dre what was going on. He looked at me for a long moment before telling me. "She drowned," he said, "years ago, in the gym." I asked how. "There wasn't a pool." "There used to be," he said. "Long time ago, back when the school first opened. It got shut down after a girl drowned during a morning swim. It was an early practice, and the coach didn't notice she'd slipped under. No one even saw her until the water turned red." I asked what happened afterward. "They drained it, covered it up, built a new gym on top of it, but people say she never left." I didn't sleep that night. I tried to avoid gym class after that, claimed a twisted ankle, got a note from the nurse, but I knew I couldn't avoid it forever. The last straw came during a Friday detention. I had gotten caught skipping class and had to stay after school in the gym to help Dunleavy set up for a Saturday tournament. He barely acknowledged me, just told me to set up the folding chairs, and left me alone. The gym was empty, quiet in that strange way where even your own breathing sounds too loud. I set up the chairs near the sidelines, trying to finish fast so I could leave. That's when the lights flickered. Only for a second, but enough to make me freeze. When they came back on, I wasn't alone. At the far end of the gym, near the center court, stood the girl. Her skin was pale, almost gray. Her hair hung in dripping clumps around her shoulders. Her clothes clung to her frame like they were still soaked. She was barefoot. Her arms dangled at her sides, and her eyes were the worst part. They were wide, unblinking, filled with water that didn't drip, but just sat there, suspended. She didn't move. I couldn't either. My breath caught in my chest. I tried to look away, but something kept me locked in. She took one step forward. The light above her exploded. Glass shattered onto the court. I turned and ran, not even thinking, just sprinting toward the exit. I didn't stop until I was outside, breathing hard in the freezing air. I waited until I was calm enough to go back in and grab my backpack. When I did, she was gone. The glass from the light was still scattered across the floor. Dunleavy was nowhere to be found. That night, I told my parents everything. To my surprise, they didn't laugh. My mom went quiet, then said something I'll never forget. When I went to school here, we weren't allowed in the gym after dark. She never explained why. I got pulled from gym class the following week, transferred into an alternative phys ed course that focused on walking laps outside and writing fitness journals. I didn't argue. I didn't even look back. I still see her sometimes, not in person, not clearly, but in reflections in puddles, in dark windows, in my rearview mirror after driving past the school. I think she remembers me. Story the end.
Story number 5.
It was during my junior year at Murdoch High School when everything started. Gym class had always been a kind of limbo in the school day, neither relaxing nor particularly stressful, but a place where we all coasted through our physical education requirements and moved on. The gym itself was old. Built sometime in the late 50s, it had that dated industrial look. Faded yellow cinder block walls, worn-out wooden bleachers, and a hardwood floor that had long since lost its shine. But the strangest part of the whole setup was the locker room. It sat below ground level, down a narrow flight of stairs off the east side of the gym, tucked away like an afterthought. No windows, dim fluorescent lighting, and a damp, metallic smell that never seemed to go away. There were always rumors about that locker room, that it used to be something else, a maintenance area or a fallout shelter. Nobody really knew, and nobody really cared enough to dig into it. For most of us, gym class was just a hurdle between second and third period. But that changed in late October. Our gym teacher, Mr. Cohen, was a Vietnam vet turned PE instructor. He wasn't the friendliest guy, but he ran a tight ship. He hated slackers, and if you forgot your gym clothes, you'd end up writing a 2-page essay about the importance of cardiovascular health. That particular week, he'd started us on circuit training. We'd spend 20 minutes on cardio, 10 minutes on weights, and 10 minutes stretching. I remember that week because it was when I started noticing things that didn't add up. It started with a towel. I had left mine on the bench by my locker number 113, right across from the old, rarely used showers. When I came back to change after class, it was gone. I figured maybe someone grabbed it by mistake, or maybe it fell behind the bench. But when I looked around, there it was, hanging on a hook inside the shower stall, wet, like it had just been used. I hadn't gone near the showers. Nobody did. They were disgusting. Tiles were cracked, some completely missing, and the pipes made noises like an old man trying to breathe. But what caught me was the way the towel was folded neatly on the hook, too deliberately. The next day, I kept my towel in my gym bag. That afternoon, as I was walking out of the locker room, I heard it. A soft slapping noise, like someone walking barefoot on the tile. I turned around, expecting to see one of the guys still getting changed, but the place was empty, dead quiet. I stood there for a second, listening. Nothing. But just as I reached the top step to leave, I heard it again. Bare feet. Just a few quick steps behind me. I didn't tell anyone. I convinced myself it was just echoes, or the sound of water dripping from the vents. The locker room always sounded weird. The acoustics down there were all wrong. You could whisper in one corner and hear it perfectly in another. But the sounds kept happening, every day. By Thursday, it was more than just noises. That day, when I opened my locker, I found my shirt soaking wet. Not just damp, completely drenched, like it had been submerged. My bag was dry. Everything else was dry. Just the shirt. I took it to Mr. Cowan. He barely looked at it before grunting and telling me to tough it out. That was his way with everything. If you sprained your ankle, he told you to walk it off. If you were bleeding, he gave you tissues and told you not to get it on the gym floor. I ended up borrowing a shirt from the lost and found bin. When I came back to the locker room after class, my locker door was wide open. I had locked it. I always locked it. But there it was, swinging slowly, hinges creaking. Inside, scratched into the paint on the back wall, was one word: stay. I didn't tell anyone. That weekend, I looked up the school online. I'd never thought about its history, but now I was curious. I dug through old articles, scanned online forums, searched archived news pages. Eventually, I found it. In 1978, a student named Evan Price had died during gym class. According to the report, he drowned, but not in a pool. We didn't even have one back then. He drowned in the shower room, apparently slipped, hit his head, and the water never turned off. They found him face down with the water still running. It was ruled an accident, but it didn't feel like one. There was a small photo attached. It was black and white, low resolution, but the kid had this blank look, like he hadn't expected to have his picture taken. Dark hair, thin frame. He was 15. That next Monday, I walked into the locker room with a knot in my chest. I kept my eyes forward, ignored the showers, changed quickly, and went up to class. But after class, things got worse. I was the last one down. Everyone else had already showered and left. When I turned the corner, I saw the shower nearest to my locker was on, steam billowing from behind the curtain. Again, nobody used those showers. Ever. I called out, "Hello?" No answer. I walked slowly toward the curtain. The steam made it hard to see. The floor was slippery. I grabbed the edge of the curtain and pulled it back. Nothing. Just water gushing from the rusted pipe, hitting the floor with a hiss. And then I looked down. Bare footprints, small ones, leading from the shower across the tile. But they didn't go out the door. They stopped halfway across the room and just disappeared. I turned around, heart hammering, and saw the mirror above the sink was fogged over. Words appeared in the condensation. 2 words. You saw. I didn't change. I ran. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Evan Price, about how he drowned in a place no one should drown, about how my locker, the noises, the shirt, none of it was random. Tuesday, I told my friend Dylan about it. He sat next to me in history and was the kind of guy who loved ghost stories, horror movies, and anything involving the paranormal. I figured if anyone would believe me, it'd be him. He didn't laugh. He looked nervous. Then he told me something I hadn't heard before. Back when his older brother went to Murdoch, there had been another incident in the locker room. A kid named Terry West, sophomore. They said he had a seizure in the showers and nearly died. His friends said he'd been talking about seeing someone. A kid in old gym clothes just watching him from the mirror. Terry transferred schools not long after. That afternoon, Dylan and I went back into the locker room after school. We waited until everyone else had cleared out and then snuck back down. He had his phone out, recording everything. We stood in silence near the showers. The lights flickered, but they always did. Then the pipes above us creaked, and the air turned colder. Not just cool, freezing, like the kind of cold that settles into your bones. And then we heard it. Water running. We turned. The same stall, water on full blast. Dylan crept forward, filming. I stood behind him, my fists clenched tight. He pulled the curtain back. Empty. But then he dropped his phone. I went to pick it up, and when I looked at the screen, I saw it. Just for a split second before the video glitched. A face. A face. In the mirror behind us. Watching. We ran. The next day, Mr. Cowan didn't show up. We had a substitute who told us Mr. Cowan had requested an immediate leave of absence. No explanation. The school said it was family related. But I knew better. I never went back into the locker room. I changed in the bathroom, ignored the looks, the jokes. Dylan never spoke about that night again. He transferred schools a month later, his family moving suddenly. I still have the video from his phone. It's mostly static now, but if you slow it down frame by frame, you can still catch the shape of a boy. Soaking wet, eyes wide open, and if you listen closely, really closely, you can hear the whisper just before the static cuts in. You saw. Story the end.
Story number 6.
I didn't really believe in ghosts before junior year. Not seriously, anyway. I had friends who swore they saw stuff, shadows moving, cold spots, whispers, but I always chalked it up to attention-seeking or overactive imaginations. That kind of thing happened all the time in my hometown, where everyone seemed to know someone who claimed the local cemetery was haunted or said their attic had a ghost. I thought it was harmless fun. That was before what happened to me during gym class at North Del High. Our school wasn't fancy. Built in the early 1960s, it had that aging feel. Yellowing tiles, buzzing lights, and a gym that always smelled faintly like sweat, floor wax, and old sneakers, no matter how much they cleaned it. It was an average public school. Nothing creepy on the surface. The gym was a rectangular structure with wooden bleachers on both sides and an elevated running track that circled above the court. It had a set of small storage rooms and two entrances to the locker rooms, which sat below the bleachers on the south side. I had gym third period that year, which meant we were some of the first people to use the facility each day. Our teacher was Mr. Creighton, who had clearly been in the job way too long and had run out of patience for teenagers years ago. He didn't care much what we did as long as we didn't break anything or fight. Most days he just barked instructions, blew his whistle, and sat on the bleachers with a clipboard while we goofed around with half-hearted effort. It started with something small. About 3 weeks into the semester, a kid named Eli, quiet, kind of a loner, came out of the locker room pale and shivering one morning. His clothes were soaked through, like he'd jumped in a pool. I remember someone laughing and asking if he got caught in the sprinklers, but he didn't answer. He just sat on the bench, staring at the floor with wide eyes. Creighton grumbled something about water fountains leaking again and told him to go to the nurse. That was the last time Eli showed up to gym class. I didn't think much of it. Maybe he transferred, maybe he was skipping, I didn't really know him well. But then things got weird again. The locker room lights started acting up. Sometimes they'd flicker or go out altogether for a few seconds. Maintenance blamed it on the old wiring. But it always seemed to happen at the same time, just after the bell rang to start gym, when everyone was changing. One time the lights cut off and stayed out for almost a minute. When they came back on, some lockers were open, ones that hadn't been touched. One guy, Marcus, swore his locker door had been yanked open even though it was locked. He started changing in the bathroom after that. Then there were the puddles, cold patches of water that would appear in the middle of the locker room floor or near the gym doors. No pipes overhead, no leaks we could see. They would just be there. Not big puddles, but enough that you had to step around them. You'd go to Creighton about it, and he'd wave you off. The roof sweats, he said once, without even looking up from his clipboard. The gym was cold, too, unnaturally so. The rest of the school was fine, but that room always felt colder than the others, even during warm days. You'd be halfway through running laps, and your breath would fog up like it was winter. People joked that it was haunted, but it was always in that mocking way. "Oh no, the ghost of failed gym grades." Stuff like that. But I noticed something no one else really talked about. Whenever I stood near the bleachers, especially on the far end, I felt watched. Not the casual someone glancing over kind of feeling. No. This was different. It was deep, lingering, like something behind the wood slats was pressing against them from the inside, just barely held back. Sometimes I'd even hear faint creaks as if someone were shifting their weight in there, despite no one sitting close. Then, one Monday morning in October, we were doing laps around the track above the court. I was jogging, earbuds in, zoning out when I felt a sudden gust of cold air rush past me from behind. The track wasn't near any vents, and no one had passed me. I paused, pulled out one earbud, and turned around. No one. But I noticed something on the floor. A small, wet footprint. Bare. Just one. Like someone stepped out of a pool and vanished. I crouched down and stared at it. It wasn't mine, and it wasn't from shoes. It had toes, arches, everything. When I looked up, I saw a blur of motion at the far end of the track disappearing around the curve. A shape. Female. Long hair in a soaked gym uniform. I blinked. She was gone. I didn't tell anyone. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that footprint. I had never believed in ghosts, but something about that felt real, tangible. The next day I got to school early and stopped by the library. I looked up old news articles about North Dell and found something from 1984. A girl named Natalie Bray drowned during gym class. It was vague, just said she had been participating in swim practice and collapsed near the edge of the pool. She never regained consciousness. Her photo was grainy and black and white, but her hair was long, parted in the middle, and she wore the same kind of uniform I thought I saw. But there was no pool at North Dell anymore. That was what confused me. Later, I asked one of the janitors about it. An older guy named Dean. He was sweeping the hallway near the gym entrance. I asked if there used to be a pool. He stopped sweeping and looked at me carefully. "There was," he said. "They sealed it off after what happened to that girl, said it was too dangerous. Budget cuts too. Budget cuts too. Filled it with concrete and turned it into storage underneath the gym. Underneath? Yeah, he nodded. That floor? It's built right over the old swim area. You're walking on top of it every time you run laps. My stomach turned. That week, the weirdness escalated. People began getting hurt. Small things at first, twisted ankles, scraped knees, bumped heads. Then bigger stuff. A kid named Hunter fell down the stairs from the upper track. He said he felt a shove, but no one was near him. He broke his collarbone. Another girl, Ava, started having panic attacks in the locker room. Said the showers would turn on by themselves. She refused to go back in. I kept seeing her. The girl, Natalie, always at the edge of my vision, reflections in the glass backboards, flickers in the mirror by the lockers. Once I saw her handprint appear on the steamed-up window after class. Just one hand. Small, perfectly clear. And still, I said nothing. I think part of me didn't want to believe it, that if I stayed quiet, ignored her, she'd go away. But she didn't. It all came to a head on a Friday afternoon. It was raining hard, and gym was one of the last periods of the day. We were split into groups playing indoor soccer. I was goalie for one team. Midway through the game, the lights flickered. The gym dimmed for just a second, and everyone paused. Then they came back on. Play resumed. That's when I saw her. She was in the goal net across from me, behind the other goalie, standing perfectly still, half shrouded in shadow. No one else seemed to notice. My breath caught. She raised her hand slowly, pointing at me. The ball came toward me, and I missed it completely. After class, I stayed behind, claiming I forgot my water bottle. Creighton waved me off and left. The gym emptied. It was just me and her. She appeared by the bleachers, wet, pale, eyes wide open. Her mouth opened, and though no sound came out, I could feel her voice in my head. Help me! I didn't know what she meant. I stood there, frozen. She turned, walked slowly to the storage door at the far end, and vanished through it. I hesitated, then followed. Inside was dark. Dusty mats, old benches, broken equipment. The floor creaked under my steps. I found an old door at the back. Rusted shut, but still marked with a faded sign, pool access. I didn't open it. I couldn't. But I knew she was behind it. Still there. Still trapped. The school never talked about her. There were no memorials, no plaques, just silence, like she never existed. But she did, and she was still waiting. After that day, I transferred out of gym. Told my parents I couldn't take it anymore. They didn't argue. I don't go near that building now. I graduate in 2 months. Still, sometimes when I walk by, I think I see her in the upper window, watching, waiting, wanting someone to finally say her name. Natalie Bray. She drowned in gym class and they covered it up, but she's still there. Story the end.
Story number 7.
I went to Monroe High, a pretty average public school in northern Illinois. There wasn't anything special about it. Concrete walls, bad cafeteria food, crowded hallways. Gym class was the only period I didn't really care about, which is why what happened caught me so off guard. The story I'm about to tell didn't happen to someone else, and it wasn't a rumor. I lived through it. And even now, years later, I don't like talking about it. But maybe if I write it down, it'll feel less like it's still hanging over me. It started in my senior year. I had gym third period, which meant I usually came in groggy and still half asleep. Our gym teacher, Mr. Leeton, was one of those middle-aged guys who looked like he used to be in great shape, but had long since given up. He was strict, but fair. He made us stretch, run laps, and do conditioning drills, then usually let us play basketball or volleyball to finish out the class. The gym itself was old, like everything else in the school, with yellowed lights and cracked floorboards that creaked when you ran on them. The locker rooms were worse. They were down a hallway from the gym, through a metal door with chipped paint that never quite shut all the way. Inside, the walls were tiled white, stained gray and brown with age, and the smell was always this mix of mold and industrial-strength disinfectant. The showers hadn't been used in years, not officially. Nobody wanted to shower in there, and the school never made us. Still, the plumbing was connected, and sometimes you'd hear the sound of water running when nobody was around. That's how it began. With water. With water. One Monday morning, I was changing out of my gym clothes after class when I heard it, the sound of a shower turning on. Not a drip, not a leak. A full-on stream of water rushing from the old rusted pipes. I remember looking around the locker room. Everyone else had already left except for me and my friend Denny, who was 2 benches over. He looked at me, confused. "Did someone actually use the shower?" he asked, frowning. I shrugged, but we both stood up and walked toward the back of the room where the shower stalls were. The school had blocked them off with a metal chain across the entrance years ago, but the chain was hanging on the floor like it had been ripped off. Water was pouring from one of the farthest stalls, steam rising in the cold air. "Hello?" Denny called. No answer. I stepped into the shower room. The floor was slick with standing water. I walked carefully, listening to the hollow echo of our footsteps. When we reached the running shower, I reached up to turn it off. And that's when I saw it. There was a footprint in the water on the tile, just one, barefoot, small, like a child's. But no one at Monroe High was that small, and no one should have been barefoot in there. The footprint wasn't just wet, it was reddish, like blood diluted in water. I stood frozen, staring. Then the water shut off by itself. Denny cursed under his breath and backed away. I followed him, both of us hurrying out without another word. We didn't talk about it the rest of the day. Maybe we both wanted to pretend it hadn't happened. The next time it happened was 2 days later. A kid named Jared, who used the locker next to mine, was sitting on the bench with a weird look on his face. He kept looking toward the shower entrance. "You hear that?" he asked me. I listened. It sounded like someone humming, a low, tuneless hum. I told him no, trying to play it off. But as we walked out of the locker room, we both turned around when we heard a crash behind us, like a locker slamming shut. Except no one else was in there. We asked Mr. Leighton about it. He brushed it off, said it was just pipes or air pressure. That explanation worked until the following Monday, when Eric Montrose went missing. He was a junior, played on the school's wrestling team. After gym class, he'd gone into the locker room to change. That day I was sick at home, but Denny texted me later with all caps, "Dude, Eric's missing. Cops are at the school." According to the rumors, he never came out of the locker room. His stuff was still in his locker, his phone left behind. The cameras in the hallway showed him entering the locker room. No footage of him leaving. At first, they thought he ran away, but his parents said he had no reason to. Then someone found something. A janitor doing a deep clean found a wet handprint smeared across the wall inside the shower stalls. Not just wet, stained red, like the footprint I saw. He quit the next day. After that, they locked the shower area entirely, welded the door shut. For about 2 weeks, nothing happened. The mood around the gym was weird, like everyone was just trying to pretend things were normal. But that tension didn't last. One day, during dodgeball, a girl named Ava screamed and dropped to her knees. I thought she'd gotten hit in the face with a ball, but when we ran over, she was staring at the bleachers, pale and shaking. "I saw someone sitting there," she said, over and over. "He was staring at me. No one else saw anyone. The bleachers were empty." She refused to go to gym class after that. People started saying the gym was cursed, that the showers were haunted. Mr. Leighton stopped trying to argue and started dismissing us early. One day, I stayed late helping him collect basketballs after class. Everyone else had gone. I was heading back to the locker room when I heard something in the hallway leading to the showers. At first, I thought it was a bird or something caught in the ductwork. Then I heard footsteps. Soft, bare feet slapping against the tile. Slow, steady. I turned and looked down the hallway. Nothing there. But I saw something wet on the floor, tiny puddles forming fresh in a trail that stopped just a few feet in front of me. I ran, didn't even change. I grabbed my bag and left. The worst part came a week before graduation. It was after school. I had stayed to finish a makeup gym test, some agility drills Mr. Leighton needed to grade me on. He stood at one end of the gym, stopwatch in hand. I ran the course, hit the marks, and when I turned around, he was gone. I waited. 5 minutes passed. 10. I called out for him. Nothing. So I walked toward the locker room, thinking maybe he'd gone to grab something. The gym was silent, and the door to the locker room was propped open. Inside, the lights were off. I pulled out my phone and used the flashlight. There were wet footprints on the floor, leading from the hallway to the middle of the locker room. I followed them without thinking, and then I heard breathing. Not mine. It came from behind the lockers. A heavy, rattling inhale. Then a wheeze. Then another breath. I turned the flashlight toward it, and I saw someone. A boy, maybe 15. He stood half in shadow. His skin looked wrong, like he'd been submerged in water too long, swollen, wrinkled. The skin around his eyes sagged and his mouth hung open like he was gasping for air. He raised a hand, took a step toward me. I dropped my phone. The light flickered. I grabbed it and ran. When I got back to the gym, Mr. Leighton was there, pale, staring at the hallway I'd just come from. "You saw him." He voiced flat. I couldn't speak. He nodded slowly. "I've seen him too." He wouldn't say more. But the next day, he announced he was retiring early. That was the last time I ever entered that locker room. A week later, a team came in and started sealing off parts of the gym. They said it was asbestos. But I knew that wasn't true. I graduated and left Monroe behind, but that face still haunts me. The waterlogged skin, the eyes that looked hollow and searching. Last year, I drove through town and past the old school. The gym was still there, lights off, windows boarded up, and on the sidewalk in front of it, I swear I saw a trail of wet footprints. Still fresh, still waiting.
Story number 8.
The year I turned 17 was the same year our school opened up an old auxiliary gym that had been closed for decades. It was 2022, and funding finally came through to renovate it. Most people didn't even know it existed until the school board announced the reopening. It sat just behind the main school building, accessible by a small hallway that had been boarded up since the 1980s. Some said it had been closed because of asbestos. Others said it was structurally unsound. But none of us really knew why. There weren't any articles, no news reports, just old dusty rumors passed from staff to students that the place had a weird vibe. The school painted it, polished the floors, installed new lockers, and turned it into a fully functioning second gym space for PE classes and after-school programs. Everyone called it the old gym, even though it now looked nearly identical to the main one. Our gym class was one of the first to use it. There were 20 of us in that period, mostly juniors and seniors, and our teacher, Coach Bradley, was this big ex-football guy who still had his whistle from the early 2000s. On the first day using the old gym, he gave us the rundown. New lockers, fresh equipment, even showers that worked. It all seemed too nice for our neglected school. But we didn't complain. The first couple of days were normal. We played basketball, ran laps, did the usual half-effort warm-ups most high schoolers pretend to take seriously. But by the end of the week, people started to talk. It began with missing items. First, it was small things, watches, earbuds, socks. Then it got weirder. One guy, Andre, swore up and down that his shoes weren't just missing, but replaced with a soaked pair that weren't even his size. They smelled like pond water. He tried to joke about it, but his hands shook when he tied them up in a plastic bag. Then it was the lockers. At first, it seemed like they were just old and sticky, some of them hard to open. But after a few days, some wouldn't stay shut no matter how hard you slammed them. Others would creak open by themselves. I saw it with my own eyes. One morning, I was tying my shoelaces, and the locker to my left just popped open, like someone inside was pushing it. I slammed it shut, thinking it was just the air pressure or something. But when I looked closer, I saw water running down the inside of the door. Not a drip, like someone had just splashed a bucket of it from the inside. The floor around it was completely dry. After that, I started paying closer attention. During dodgeball or warm-ups, I'd glance at the far end of the gym where the old storage closets were still locked. There was a small window near the ceiling, probably from when the place was used in the 70s or 80s. The kind of window you'd need a ladder to reach. A couple times, I swear I saw someone looking through it. Pale face, dark eyes, watching. The kind of look that makes your stomach twist. I told a few people. Most of them just said, "You've been watching too many horror movies," or laughed it off. But not Mel. She was one of the seniors, quiet, kind of kept to herself. One afternoon when we were sitting out of volleyball, I mentioned it again, and she didn't laugh. Instead, she leaned in and said, "I've seen her too." I blinked. "Who?" "The girl in the old gym." Mel told me that her aunt used to teach at the school back in the 80s. She said there was a girl named Camille who had a seizure during gym class. They were doing laps, and she collapsed. Back then, no one had phones. It took too long for help to come. She died right there on the floor. The school tried to hush it up. No news story, no memorial, just silence. A few years later, The gym was closed. Officially, it was maintenance, but unofficially, staff said weird things started happening. Equipment moving, kids hearing footsteps during study halls. One teacher quit after being locked in there alone during lunch duty. They sealed the hallway, boarded up the doors, and built the new gym across campus. No one had said a word about it since. Mel told me she felt sick every time we changed in the new old locker room, that she could hear whispers in the showers, not water running, actual voices, breathing. And once, someone touched her back, ice cold, when she was completely alone. After she told me that, I stopped brushing things off. I started noticing small changes in my own routine. My shirt would be damp when I pulled it from the locker. Once, I smelled chlorine even though there was no pool in the building. Another time, I found a lock of hair tucked into my sock. Black, wet, tangled. It wasn't mine. By the second week, Coach Bradley started acting different too. He used to be loud, full of energy. Now, he barely spoke. He watched us from the bleachers like he was keeping an eye on something, not us. He'd flinch if you called his name too loud. One time he made us run outside, even though it was 40 degrees, just to avoid using the gym. When someone asked why, he snapped and said, "I don't want to be in there any longer than I have to." That night, I did some digging. I went through yearbooks in the library, looking for anything about Camille. Nothing. No obituary, no mention, not even a senior photo. It was like she'd been erased. I asked one of the older custodians, Mr. Carroll, if he remembered a girl dying in the gym. He paused, looked me dead in the eye. "Don't ask about her," he said. "But," I said, "don't." He walked away without another word. That week, things spiraled. A freshman had a panic attack in the locker room, said the mirrors were lying to her, that her reflection blinked when she didn't. Another kid slipped on the gym floor. When they helped him up, he kept whispering, "She's under the court," over and over. He wouldn't stop. They had to call his mom. Then, on a Wednesday, the fire alarm went off during sixth period. We all evacuated. Turned out, the sprinklers in the old gym went off by themselves. Flooded half the court, no fire, no smoke, just gallons of water. They shut it down for 3 days. When we came back, the floor was warped. I noticed it when I walked across. Certain parts dipped, others creaked, like the foundation underneath had shifted. Coach Bradley didn't say anything, just told us to keep to the edges. That Friday, we were told to pair up for stretches. I partnered with Mel. Halfway through toe touches, she froze. Her eyes were locked on the center of the court. I looked but saw nothing. "Do you hear it?" she asked. "Hear what?" "Her. She's crying." I listened. At first, nothing. Then, faintly, so faint it could have been my imagination, I heard a girl sobbing from under the floorboards. It didn't echo like it was in the room. It sounded trapped, muffled, pained. Mel bolted. I caught up to her in the locker room. She was shaking. "She's still there," she said. "They never moved her. They covered it up, boarded it, but she's still underneath." I didn't know what to say. Over the weekend, I had the worst dream I've ever had. I was running laps in the old gym alone. The lights flickered. I tripped. When I looked up, I was eye level with the floor. I realized I wasn't in the gym anymore. I was under it, in darkness. The sound of kids running echoed above me, but I was buried in some kind of crawl space, sealed off and rotting. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. And then right in front of me, I saw her, Camille. Her skin was pale blue, her lips cracked, eyes wide and bloodshot. She didn't move. She just stared at me. And then she screamed. I woke up soaked in sweat, my sheets damp and cold. The air in my room smelled like chlorine. That Monday, I went to the principal, told her everything. She looked tired, told me I wasn't the first student to come forward, but there was no record of any Camille. She showed me student death reports from the district archives. Nothing. No record of a girl dying in gym. No parents filed lawsuits. Nothing in the paper. Some of these stories have been circulating for years, she said. Urban legends. But her hands were shaking as she said it. 2 days later, Coach Bradley quit. No notice, no goodbye. Just walked off campus. A substitute took over. They moved us back to the main gym. Said the old one had foundation problems. The hallway is boarded up again now, just like before. They tried to forget her, tried to bury her, but I still hear the crying sometimes. If I stand too close to the new hallway, if I let my thoughts drift during practice, I hear it. A girl's sobs, trapped under decades of cylinder paint and polish and lies. Camille never left, and she doesn't want to be forgotten again. Story the end.
Story number 9.
Through a bunch of renovations that shifted everything around. They were updating the science labs and art wing, and it caused this weird domino effect that ended with our gym classes being moved to this old annex building behind the school. Most students didn't even know the annex had a gym, but it used to be the original athletic building before the current main gym was built in the late 80s. It had been locked up for a long time, and most teachers avoided talking about it unless you pushed. The first day we had class there, we were all kind of excited just because it felt like something different. The gym itself was smaller and darker, with these old wooden floors that creaked even when you tiptoed. There were 2 rows of bleachers, one of which was broken and chained off, and ancient basketball hoops with frayed nets. The smell hit you as soon as you walked in, musty, like damp socks and rotting wood. The locker rooms were the worst part. Fluorescent lights flickered like bad movie effects, and the tiles were cracked, stained, and cold. None of the lockers had working locks, so Coach Hollis told us to just bring our stuff with us onto the court. It's only temporary, he said. A couple weeks max. It ended up lasting for 2 months. Right away, weird stuff started happening. It wasn't like a big dramatic ghost throws a ball across the gym kind of thing. It was subtle. At first. The first time I noticed something, it was during warm-ups. We were jogging in a circle around the court. It was a normal day. Coach Hollis had his clipboard and whistle, standing in the center, calling out names of kids who weren't putting in any effort. I was at the back of the line when I heard sneakers squeaking behind me, like someone sprinting. I turned around, expecting to see someone catching up, but there was no one there. I figured I imagined it, but then it happened again. This time louder, like someone was full-on running right behind me. Again, no one. I didn't say anything because I knew what would happen if I did. People already thought I was weird because I liked books and horror movies and stayed quiet in class. I didn't want to give anyone more fuel. But then other people started noticing things. Kayla, this super athletic girl who was always picked first for teams, came out of the locker room crying one day. She said someone whispered her name in the shower, but no one else had been in there. I remember her eyes, red and wide, not the kind of fake tears you do for attention. She quit gym entirely and got a note to sit out the rest of the semester. Then Ryan, one of the most skeptical people in our grade, said he saw someone standing in the far bleachers during basketball practice. He said the figure looked like a girl wearing old gym clothes, like really old from the 70s or something. He joked about it at first, trying to make people laugh, but you could tell it bothered him. The next time we had gym, he kept glancing up at the bleachers every few minutes like he expected someone to be there. By the 3rd week, it wasn't just little things anymore. It was full-on disturbing. One day, we were doing this exercise where we had to run from wall to wall and time our sprints. We were split into small groups. I was paired with Mia and Calvin. Coach blew the whistle, and we took off. About halfway across, I heard Mia scream behind me. Not like a startled shriek. This was a gut-level, terrified scream that made everyone stop. I turned around and saw her collapsed on the floor, holding her ankle. She kept saying she'd been grabbed, that something had reached up and yanked her leg from beneath the floorboards. We all stood there in silence. Coach Hollis tried to calm her down and help her to the nurse's office, but I remember the look on his face. He didn't look confused. He looked like he'd seen it before. That night, I went home and tried looking up the school's history. There wasn't much. A couple photos of the building from the 1960s. One old yearbook scan. But then I found this obscure local forum that had a thread about urban legends from around town. Buried about halfway down the page was a story titled "The Girl in the Gym." It said that back in 1978, a girl named Annalise died during gym class in that annex. No one knew how exactly. The official report said accidental fall, but rumors said she had a seizure after hitting her head on the court. Some versions claimed she had been pushed by another student. Others said she saw something that scared her so badly, she backed into the bleachers and cracked her skull open. There were no photos, no news reports, just this vague thread and a bunch of responses saying they'd heard the same thing growing up. The next day in gym, I couldn't stop looking around. I didn't want to believe it, but things kept getting worse. We were doing sit-ups in pairs, and I was holding Devin's ankles while he did his set. He paused halfway through and stared over my shoulder. "Dude," he whispered, "who's that?" I turned, expecting Coach or one of the other students, but there was no one. Just the wall, the basketball hoop, and the old scoreboard that hadn't worked since we started using the place. I looked back at Devin. His face had gone pale. "She was just there," he said. "Right there, under the hoop." I didn't ask what she looked like. I already knew. That afternoon, I stayed behind after class and asked Coach Hollis straight out if anyone had ever died in that gym. His eyes locked onto mine. No hesitation. "You shouldn't ask about that," he said. "But someone did, right? A girl?" He sighed and walked over to the bleachers. He sat down slowly like his bones ached. "It was before my time," he said. "But yeah, there was a girl. It was a long time ago." "Do you know what happened?" He looked down at the floor, then back up at the broken scoreboard. "Some say she had a medical issue. Others say it was something else. What I know is kids started seeing her. Not just once or twice. Enough that they closed the place down. They thought it would go away if they ignored it." "Did it?" He looked at me for a long time. "You tell me." After that, I started keeping track of everything. The squeaky sneakers behind me, the lockers that banged shut on their own, the smell, sometimes like chlorine, sometimes like old blood, the feeling of being watched during stretches, the way shadows moved slightly off from the direction of the light. Once the lights went out during warm-ups, we stood frozen in the dark for 30 seconds. When they came back on, someone had drawn a handprint on the far wall in red marker. At least we thought it was marker. But the worst moment came in the final week we used the annex. We were doing relay races. Coach divided us into 4 groups. I was in the last group, standing at the far edge of the court near the broken bleachers. We were waiting our turn. It was quiet except for the pounding of feet and the occasional cheer. Then I felt it. A hand. Ice cold. On my back. I jumped forward, spinning around expecting someone to be behind me playing a prank. But no one was there. Just the shadow of the bleachers. I backed away, heart racing. Then I saw it. Just for a split second. In the space between the bottom row of the bleachers and the floor, a face. Pale. Wide-eyed. Hair wet and clinging to her forehead. She stared straight at me. Then vanished. I didn't tell anyone that day. I couldn't. I was afraid if I spoke it out loud, it would make it worse. Later that night, I woke up to the sound of sneakers squeaking outside my bedroom door, like someone was running back and forth in the hallway. I opened the door. Nothing. My parents were asleep. My little sister was at a sleepover, but the air smelled like that same mildewed gym floor, that same old sweat and damp rubber. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt like she was standing next to the bed. That Monday, we were told that Jim was moving back to the main building. The annex had failed some inspection, something about humidity damage and floor instability. The hall leading to the annex was locked the next day. No one mentioned it again. A few months later, they started tearing it down. I watched from the classroom window as the bulldozers ripped through the walls. No ceremony, no official announcement, just erased like she'd never been there. But I still remember. Every time I pass that spot behind the school, I think about the creaky floorboards, the whispered names, the cold hand, and I wonder if she's really gone. Because sometimes when I'm walking alone, I hear those sneakers squeaking behind me. Closer and closer. Story the end.